everything you think you know about feeding garden birds is probably half wrong. This is the complete no myths guide to food, water, shelter, hygiene, and safety, and what's actually killing the birds you're trying to help. Let's start with the bad news. Some of the most common helpful habits are actively harmful, and nobody tells you until the damage is done. Bread is the classic offender, and probably the single most common act of kindness inflicted on garden birds. It's not toxic, but it's nutritionally worthless, essentially empty calories that fill a bird's stomach without giving it any of the fat or protein it actually needs to survive. A bird that gorges on bread can end up malnourished while looking perfectly full, which is precisely why the practice persists. Nothing about it looks like harm in the moment. Milk is worse because it's actively harmful rather than just pointless. Birds, like most non-mammals, don't produce lactase as adults, meaning they physically can't digest lactose. Giving them milk-soaked bread, a genuinely common practice, particularly among people trying to soften bread for smaller birds, can cause digestive upset severe enough to kill the smallest visitors to your garden. The soft, generous gesture and the harmful outcome are the same action. Salted or heavily seasoned food belongs in the same bin. Birds have no efficient way to process the sodium levels found in things like salted nuts or crisps, and excess salt can cause kidney damage or dehydration. If a snack would need a pint of water to wash down for a human, it's not going anywhere near a bird feeder. Then there's the ice problem, which catches out even well-meaning bird lovers who've got everything else right. When a bird bath freezes over in winter, the instinct is to reach for antifreeze, or salt, to stop it happening again. Don't. Antifreeze is lethal in genuinely tiny quantities. It doesn't take much for a bird sipping from a treated bath to be poisoned, and salt disrupts the sodium balance in a bird's kidneys in much the same way it does with oversalted food. The correct method is mechanical, not chemical. Break the ice by hand each morning, or invest in a solar or battery-powered bath heater built specifically for the job. With the myths out of the way, here's what you should actually be putting out. Sunflower hearts are the closest thing to a universal bird food. No shell means no mess on your patio, and no discarded husks for you to sweep up. And they're calorie-dense enough that almost every garden species, from finches to blackbirds, will happily eat them. If you only ever put out one food, this is the one that does the most work. Niger seed is more specialist, aimed squarely at goldfinches, whose narrow beaks are built for exactly this seed and not much else. It needs its own dedicated feeder with tiny ports, since a standard feeder will just spill it onto the ground where nothing eats it. A standard mixed seed blend, by contrast, covers your ground feeders, dunnocks, sparrows, collared doves, species that are far more comfortable picking through scattered seed than clinging to a hanging feeder. Fat-based foods, suet balls, fat blocks, fat cakes matter more than people assume, particularly in winter, when birds are burning enormous amounts of energy just to maintain body temperature through a long, cold night. Fat is calorie-dense in a way seed simply isn't, and a bird that can't find enough fat reserves before a cold snap can die of exposure by morning, regardless of how much seed it ate the day before. Peanuts come with a genuine hazard most people never hear about. Fed whole, they're a choking risk, particularly for chicks that get fed peanut chunks by well-meaning parent birds before they're developmentally ready to handle them. The fix is a mesh feeder, which forces adult birds to peck fragments off rather than carrying away a whole nut. Skip the mesh, and you're not helping tits and woodpeckers, species that genuinely benefit from peanuts. You're gambling with their chicks' lives for the sake of convenience. Mealworms, liver dried, are prized by robins, blackbirds, and wrens, and they matter more than seeds specifically during breeding season, because growing chicks need protein, not carbohydrate, to develop feathers, muscle, and bone at the rate nature demands of them. A parent bird stuffing a chick full of sunflower hearts isn't doing it any favors. Finally, chopped fruit, apples and pears left out on the ground gives blackbirds and thrushes something seed feeders don't typically offer at all. And it's one of the cheapest additions on this entire list, usually just the leftovers from your own fruit bowl. Water. The part people. While forget a bird bath sounds like the easy bit, and that's exactly why it gets neglected. Keep it shallow. Deep water is a drowning risk for smaller birds. Keep it topped up, especially through dry or freezing weather when natural sources vanish, and clean it regularly. Stagnant water spreads disease fast in a space that's small, turning the one thing you put out to help birds into the thing most likely to make several of them sick at once. Position matters as much as maintenance. A bath position too close to dense shrubbery gives cats a front row seat to an easy ambush on a bathing, distracted bird. And a bathing bird is about as distracted as a bird gets, mid-splash, with its guard entirely down. Keep it out in the open, away from any cover a predator could use to close the distance unseen. Hygiene, the silent killer. This is the section nobody thinks about until something goes wrong, and it's arguably the most important one on this list. Feeders and baths need cleaning every 1 to 2 weeks with a mild disinfectant, followed by a thorough rinse and a full dry before refilling. Skip this, and you're not just leaving mess behind, you're running a disease vector. And a popular one at that, and since feeders concentrate more birds in one small space than almost anywhere else in the garden. Moldy or spoiled food left sitting in a feeder can cause trichomoniasis, a parasitic infection that spreads bird to bird at shared feeding stations and can be fatal, particularly to species like greenfinches and chaffinches. A feeder you never clean isn't a kindness. It's a hazard with a roof on it, quietly doing more harm than good the longer it goes untouched. Moving feeder positions occasionally also helps, since droppings accumulating in one exact spot over months creates the same kind of contamination risk as a dirty feeder. The ground itself becomes part of the problem, even if the feeder hanging above it is spotless. If you have made it this far and have not smashed that subscribe button yet, consider this your feeder cleaning reminder. Do it for the birds, and do it for the algorithm. Shelter and nesting. More rules than you would expect. Nest boxes are not one size fits all, and the size of the entrance hole is the whole game, not a minor speck you can ignore. Small holes suit tits, who need that exact restriction to keep larger, more aggressive birds from muscling in on the space. Open-fronted boxes suit robins, who will not use an enclosed box at all, since their instinct is to nest somewhere they can see out from, not hide inside a sealed chamber. Buy the wrong box shape for the birds in your garden, and you have effectively built expensive garden decoration. Beyond boxes, the garden itself needs some deliberate neglect. Hedges, shrubs, and untidy corners are not laziness. They are cover and nesting material. And a garden that is tidied within an inch of its life has nowhere left for a bird to actually build. And there is a hard seasonal rule attached to this. Avoid trimming hedges during nesting season, roughly March to August in the UK, since a quick tidy-up can destroy an active nest, eggs and all, without you ever knowing it was there in the first place. Roosting pouches, meanwhile, give small birds somewhere to shelter overnight in freezing conditions, a detail that sounds minor, almost an afterthought, but can genuinely be the difference between a bird surviving a hard cold snap or not making it to morning. Safety? Keeping predators at bay. Feeder placement is a genuine balancing act, and it's easy to get catastrophically wrong in either direction. Too close to dense cover, and a cat gets a hiding spot to launch an ambush from. Too exposed, out an open lawn with nothing nearby, and there's no escape route if a sparrowhawk shows up mid-feeding. The sweet spot is a few feet from cover, close enough that a startled bird can flee into it in half a second, far enough that nothing can stalk from it unseen and unheard. Window collisions are a far bigger killer than most people realize, precisely because they're invisible in the moment. A bird sees open sky reflected in glass and simply doesn't register the barrier until it's too late. Bird-safe stickers or films on glass reduce that risk significantly by breaking up the reflection into something a bird's brain reads as solid rather than sky. And if you own a cat, a bell on the collar helps, though it's far from foolproof, since plenty of cats being cats, learn to stalk in a way that barely rings the bell at all. Care isn't static across the year, and treating every month the same misses what birds actually need at each specific stage of their calendar. Winter is about fat and unfrozen water above everything else. This is when birds are under the most physical strain, burning reserves just to survive overnight temperatures, and calorie-dense food is the single biggest lifeline you can offer them. Spring and breeding season shift the priority entirely to protein, mealworms, and insects, taking precedence over plain seed because chicks need protein to grow feathers, muscle, and bone, not just calories to keep warm the way an adult does. Summer is mostly about water security, keeping sources topped up through hot, dry stretches when natural water sources, puddles, ditches, ponds, can dry up entirely, leaving your garden as one of the only reliable options nearby. Autumn is arguably the season of doing less rather than more, leaving seed heads and berries on plants instead of deadheading everything. For tidiness, gives birds a natural food source heading into the leaner months, at zero cost to you. Everything above is maintenance, things you do on a schedule, week after week. This last section is architecture, the garden choices that pay off over years rather than weeks, and that keep working even on the days you forget to refill a feeder. Native plants, berry bushes, and seed-bearing flowers like teasel, sunflowers, and ivy provide a food source that doesn't depend on you remembering anything at all. It simply grows, seeds, and feeds birds on its own schedule. A brush pile or log pile does something similar indirectly by supporting the insect population that birds rely on for protein, effectively turning a pile of garden waste into a slow-release food source. And pesticides undercut all of it in one move, since killing off the insects birds eat removes a food source no feeder, however well stocked, can fully replace. Get all of this right, and your garden stops being a single feeding station and starts functioning as a small, self-sustaining habitat, which, if you've sat through this entire list, is presumably the point. If you want to know which of your garden visitors is doing the hunting rather than the eating, watch Every Bird of Prey explained next.